I spend a lot of time trying to find the best sleepers, the next breakout star, or the best values in drafts. But the guys at the top still deserve some love. With that in mind, I've identified 6 players who are set to break fantasy football in 2024. These are the guys whose stars are aligning perfectly to not only finish number 1 at their position, but to have a truly game-breaking season. Think Christian McCaffrey or Tyreek Hill last year. You're going to have to roster one of these guys to win championships in 2024. Let's start at the top with the guy that I was fading a year ago. I came on here and begged you not to draft Bijan Robinson in the first round last year. Unfortunately, I was very right. However, I'm telling you that now is the time to get him. We all know this story from his rookie season. Evil Arthur Smith refused to utilize his rookie running back, who he had just used a top 10 pick on, by the way. But he refused to utilize him to the full extent of his abilities or anything close to it, really. It was a disaster. Bijan Robinson ranked 31st in opportunity share and 25th in total touches among running backs. And he barely had more carries than teammate Tyler Algier. And Arthur Smith's infatuation with Tyler Algier was most apparent in the red zone, where he out-carried Bijan Robinson 36-23. Even Cordero Patterson got involved with 10 carries inside the 20 for some reason. I don't know. But that's according to FTM. But somehow Bijan Robinson broke through all of that and still managed a moderate 14.5 fantasy points per game, which ranked number 17 among all running backs. He did that with efficiency plus his involvement in the passing game. In fact, Bijan Robinson was 3rd at his position in targets, and he finished number 6 in receptions and 4th in receiving yards, according to Player Profiler. But as we look ahead to 2024, there is plenty of reason to expect a huge leap forward for Bijan Robinson in his second season. The most obvious is the departure of Arthur Smith. Not only is Smith out, but new head coach Raheem Morris has raved about his new running back and has emphasized the importance of getting the ball in his hands. When he was asked what to expect from this offense this season, Raheem Morris said this.
In the simplest form as you can possibly make it is get the ball to Bijan as much as you can in as many ideal situations that you possibly can. When you get the ball in his hand, he makes people miss. He gets extra yards. He's able to fight for extra yards. He breaks tackles. He's fast. He's explosive. He's strong. He can do so many things. I think he compared himself to that Christian McCaffrey role. And if we can get anywhere near the great player that Christian McCaffrey is, I think we'll all be pretty excited.
That's what we needed to hear, baby. And Raheem Morris hired Zach Robinson to run the offense in Atlanta. And Zach Robinson comes from the Rams and the Sean McVay system, where there has never been any questions about whether or not the star players were getting the ball enough. I mean, take Kyren Williams a year ago, for example. He led all running backs in touches per game. And nobody's going to dispute that Bijan Robinson is far more talented and worthy of a bell cow role than Kyren Williams. So it feels pretty safe that Zach Robinson is going to lean heavily on Bijan and will get the full usage that many were expecting last year. And let's not forget the Falcons also upgraded the quarterback position from Taylor Heineke and Desmond Ridder to Kirk Cousins. That's only going to help open up the offense for everyone involved. There'll be more plays run, more first downs, longer drives, more red zone trips, and a lot more points scored, both in reality and in fantasy. If there's anyone who can overtake Christian McCaffrey as the best running back in fantasy football this season, it's Bijan Robinson. Draft him in the top 5 with confidence. Somehow, Breece Hall managed to finish as the RB2 in PPR formats last season, despite coming off an ACL injury, running behind a terrible offensive line, and dealing with the NFL's worst quarterback play. I mean, the 2023 New York Jets were a fantasy football running back's worst nightmare. And yet Breece Hall fought through it all to put up some incredible performances. He did that by creating on his own and dominating in the receiving game. Hall led all running backs in targets, receptions, and receiving yards. He was also 3rd in yards per route, 4th in target share, and number 12 in yards per reception. And in the run game, Breece Hall was constantly hit at or behind the line of scrimmage. He overcame that, though, by leading the NFL in evaded tackles and finishing number 3 in yards created. That's according to Player Profiler. It's honestly hard to believe how good he really was in that environment. After the team took it easy on his recovered knee during the first 4 weeks, Breece Hall averaged over 100 yards from scrimmage for the rest of the season. He was at his best, though, over the last 5 weeks, where he finished as a top 3 running back 4 times, and he averaged 25.8 fantasy points per game. Imagine what he's going to do with a full healthy offseason and training camp, a healthy Aaron Rodgers, and an upgraded offensive line. That's right, they upgraded the offensive line. No more getting stuffed behind the line of scrimmage on damn near every carry. The Jets added 3 new starters. 8-time Pro Bowl left tackle Tyron Smith, guard John Simpson, and right tackle Morgan Moses. It's going to be a whole new game up front. And that's going to help Breece Hall rip off big plays in the run game, command targets out of the backfield, and his touchdown numbers are going to get a healthy boost. And with a top 10 defense on the other side, the Jets are going to lean on their 23-year-old running back to close out games on top of being their best playmaker. Breece Hall has a very real chance to break fantasy football and be the #1 running back in 2024. We all agree that the best part of fantasy football is the draft, right? I used to have to stop myself from drafting too many teams because how am I going to manage that many rosters during the season? I don't have time for all that. That's where Underdog Fantasy comes in. On Underdog, all you do is draft. No lineup setting, no waiver wire, just draft, and you're done. And you can win real money. I'm drafting teams everywhere I go. I'm drafting in line at the grocery store. I'm drafting while I'm cooking dinner. And don't tell my boss, but I'm drafting teams on Underdog all day while I'm at work. There's no limit. So get on Underdog Fantasy, use promo code YARDSPER to get your pick'em special and your $250 deposit bonus, and start drafting morning, day, and night. Just like with Bijan Robinson earlier, we are celebrating the departures of Arthur Smith and Desmond Ridder for Drake London as well. London has had a disappointing start to his career from a raw numbers standpoint. However, in his rookie season in particular, Drake London flashed some exceptional peripheral numbers. In 2022, he was targeted 117 times, and he finished top 5 in target share among all wide receivers. He was number 2 in targets per route, top 12 in yards per route run, and number 16 in yards per team pass attempts. While those obviously don't directly translate to fantasy points, they give us the confidence that Drake London is a quality NFL wide receiver who just needs an improved environment and a quarterback upgrade. And that's where we say, welcome to the Falcons, Zach Robinson and Kirk Cousins. Robinson, as I mentioned earlier, comes from the Sean McVay coaching tree. So he fully understands what's involved with building a quality offense and getting the ball in the hands of its best players. That's something that was missing from Atlanta a year ago. And Kirk Cousins already has familiarity with that offensive scheme, considering that he worked in it in both Minnesota and Washington. So those two will come together to put out a competent offense that at worst is going to be a significant upgrade over last season's mess under Arthur Smith. And if all the stars align properly, the Falcons could end up being among the best offenses in the league. And that's only going to be good for Drake London, who has flashed the ability to become that true alpha that we thought he would be when he was entering the league. And there were 2 weeks in 2023 that really showed us that upside and could become more of a regular occurrence with competent coaching and upgraded quarterback play. The first was in week 6 against Washington, when Drake London caught 9 passes for 125 yards, and he scored as the wide receiver 5 for the week. And then he was the wide receiver 2 a few weeks later when he torched the Bucs for 172 yards and 29.2 fantasy points on 10 receptions. Drake London has led the Falcons in targets in both of his seasons. I expect that's going to continue in 2024. The difference is going to be higher volume and more catchable targets. I mean, it is a major projection to think that Drake London can be a top 10 wide receiver in fantasy football, but he's only just turning 23 years old, and he has given us just enough taste of his potential to predict that now is that time. It's going to be a consolidated offense, which we like. Most of the touches are going to go to Drake London, Bijan Robinson, and Kyle Pitts. The talent is there for Drake London. The quarterback is there. The competent coaching is there. We're going to see a major uptick in overall volume and red zone targets. And we've seen wide receivers break fantasy football in this Sean McVay style offense before. I mean, we had Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua in Los Angeles and Justin Jefferson with Kirk Cousins in Minnesota. Could Drake London be next? Amon-Ra St. Brown has had 3 straight seasons with 90 or more targets to begin his career. And those targets have gone up every year, as have his receptions, receiving yards, and receiving touchdowns. He's been the wide receiver 26, the wide receiver 10, and the wide receiver 4 in fantasy points per game. Could this be the year he gets to wide receiver 1? Amon-Ra St. Brown averaged just under 21 fantasy points per game in 2023 on the back of 119 receptions, 1,515 receiving yards, and 10 touchdowns. He was top 5 in targets, target rate, target share, and red zone targets. He won on nearly 55% of his routes according to playerprofiler.com, while finishing top 5 in total route wins. And while it's no surprise that he got open so frequently, he's well known as one of the best route runners and separators in the NFL by now. But Amon-Ra St. Brown dominated after the catch as well. He ate up nearly 700 yards post-reception, which was second only to CeeDee Lamb. And he was able to maintain his incredible efficiency despite being used more down the field than in years past. He completely debunked the notion that he's just an underneath guy by opening up his route tree to incorporate more intermediate and deep patterns. His average target distance increased by nearly 2 yards, and his deep ball targets went up from 6 in 2022 to 16. If those numbers continue to rise, that could be all it takes for Amon-Ra St. Brown to become the top scoring wide receiver in fantasy football. He's going to continue to see a ton of targets thrown in his direction. And those targets are going to be hyper consolidated in Detroit between Amon-Ra St. Brown, Sam Laporta, and running back Jahmyr Gibbs. Jameson Williams going to be a distant fourth option. And any fear of Jared Goff at quarterback has been long forgotten, as Goff has played well for multiple seasons with the Lions. He can absolutely help fuel a wide receiver one season for Amon-Ra St. Brown, similar to what Kirk Cousins did with Justin Jefferson in Minnesota or Matthew Stafford with Cooper Kupp in LA. I will be drafting Amon-Ra St. Brown ahead of both Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase in 2024, with the expectation that he can also outscore Tyreek Hill and CeeDee Lamb if things break right. How cool would it be to have a full-length podcast about your fantasy football league? That would be pretty sweet, right? Well, we offer exactly that at yardsperfantasy.com. All you need to do is sign up and tell us a little bit about your league. And our team of real fantasy football analysts will break down each team with player evaluations, trade advice, draft strategy. We'll give you a team outlook, and we promise not to hold back on the roasting either. Sign-ups are happening right now, and there are limited spots available. So head over to yardsperfantasy.com and let's get started. Kyler Murray might be the most underrated quarterback in all of fantasy football. He's incredibly consistent year over year, and now he's a full year removed from the ACL injury that cost him the end of the 2022 season and the beginning of the 2023 season. And even coming off the injury, Murray performed well down the stretch. He scored as a top 12 quarterback 5 times, completing 66% of his passes, and he ranked top 10 among quarterbacks in fantasy points per dropback. And Murray's legs looked healthy too. He ran 5 or more times in 7 of 8 games, and he totaled 244 yards and 3 touchdowns on the ground. He had the offense rolling too, averaging 22.4 points per game in his 8 starts. And if we extrapolate that out for a full season, that would have slotted between the Texans at 22.7 and the Chiefs at 22.2. And we forget how good Kyler Murray has been in fantasy football during his career. It didn't always look pretty in the dreadful Cliff Kingsbury offense, but Murray seemed to always get there for fantasy purposes. In his career, Kyler Murray has scored as the QB 11, which was his rookie season, the QB 3, the QB 4, and the QB 7. And then upon his return from the ACL injury, he was QB 9 in fantasy points per game. And even with the injury recovery aside, Kyler Murray was still playing in a brand new offense that he had never practiced in prior to his return. I mean, he was rehabbing during the offseason installs and training camp, but now Kyler Murray has a full offseason and preseason and training camp to work with his teammates and the coaches. He will also get to enjoy some new weapons and a bolstered offensive line. Rookie wide receiver Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to be a major difference maker on top of last year's breakout tight end, Trey McBride. Kyler Murray could break fantasy football in 2024. He has legitimate QB1 overall upside. He's got his health, he's got great weapons, an improved offensive line, and a bad defense on the other side that's going to keep him throwing and running. And that Konami code factor could have him scoring among the elite quarterbacks in fantasy football. Yet you can get him at a multi-round discount compared to Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, and Patrick Mahomes. Even Anthony Richardson, CJ Stroud, and Joe Burrow are going ahead of him in drafts. Kyler Murray will be one of my most drafted quarterbacks in 2024. I urge you to follow suit. Anthony Richardson's rookie season seemed to end about as fast as it began. But man, was he electric when he was on the field. He started 4 games, but he only made it through 2 of them healthy. But in those 2 games, though, he averaged more than 25 fantasy points, and he scored as the QB2 and the QB4. A lot of that was due to his legs. He ran for 136 yards, and he scored a rushing touchdown in 3 of his 4 starts. It was an extremely small sample, but Anthony Richardson ranked number 5 among quarterbacks in rush attempts per game and number 3 in red zone carries per game. And that all culminated in 0.81 fantasy points per dropback, which would have ranked number 1 among all quarterbacks. Now healthy heading into the 2024 season, Anthony Richardson holds as much upside as any quarterback in fantasy football. He will pair his incredible rushing ability with improved weaponry around him. Remember, Anthony Richardson only played about half a game with Jonathan Taylor on the backfield last year. It's going to be a ton of fun to see those two pair up for a lethal rushing attack. The team also brought back Michael Pittman, who had a breakout campaign in 2023, and they added Adonai Mitchell in the second round of the draft, and are returning Josh Downs for a second season after he had a nice first year. That sets up the Colts as potentially one of the best offenses in the NFL. Led by rookie head coach Shane Steichen last year, the Colts offense impressed even with Gardner Minshew under center. And Richardson's skill set compared to Minshew's opens up so many more opportunities down the field, in the red zone, and in the run game. And Richardson will also benefit from the fast pace of Shane Steichen's play calling. In fact, the Colts were top 3 in pace of play in 2023. The faster an offense plays, the more plays they run, and there are more opportunities to score fantasy points. There is no reason why a healthy Anthony Richardson can't be a top 5 quarterback in fantasy football. He has the skill set, the supporting cast, and an offensive play caller putting him in position to succeed. He's going to challenge the likes of Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, and Patrick Mahomes to be the top scoring quarterback in all of fantasy football. And yet you can draft him multiple rounds after those guys come off the board. Anthony Richardson is the league-winning quarterback of 2024.